Let's get started at the beginning. At the very beginning, where we all start out. Helpless. Helpless and entirely dependent on other people for everything. We quickly realize, though, that there are these other people out there who are not helpless, who can manipulate the world around them, who know about the world around them, who can change things, who know how to do things. And we start seeing these people almost as super people. And in time, we learn about the world around us, we learn how things work, and we become these people. We become this guy and these folks. And then what happens when we finally reach that point where we can change the world, where we can make a difference? Something like this happens. When I see something like this, this is a ticket machine in Stockholm, Sweden. It does only one thing. It sells you a ticket from the station you're at to the airport. That's all it does. Look at how complicated it is. When I see something like this, I feel like that little baby again, but trapped in the body of an adult. I don't know what to do. Why? Let's take a closer look at this. Look at what it has. It's got lots of instructions on how it should be used. That's a certain smell that tells you maybe it's not very intuitive. They've got more instructions. They wrote a novel about it. It tells you which credit cards you can use. It tells you which credit cards you can't use on it as well. It's got a screen with lots of beautifully beveled buttons. And the thing about this is, the people who designed this knew that there was something wrong, because they built a telephone into it, which you can use to ask for help. So there's some poor person stuck in their mother's basement, probably with no natural light, who has to answer calls from people at every hour of the day because they could not design this better. Now, I want to show you a machine that does exactly the same thing, but this time in Oslo. Now, remember that this machine does exactly the same thing. This is what it looks like. And here's how you use it. You take your credit card, which is already in your pocket, and you swipe it through, like this man is right now. You swipe it through, and then you walk on the train. That's how it works. That's all there is. You swipe your credit card, you walk on the train. You know, on the other end, you swipe the card again, and you're through. Now, this machine, that ability to just that makes me feel like a superhero. But how can two things that do the same thing be so different? I mean, is it just that the designers in Sweden had no common sense? No, I don't think so. Mostly because common sense is a myth. It does not exist. Common sense is usually what we blame when we've been too lazy to understand the problem that we're solving. What we really need is focus on a very, very important thing. On delivering quality, not quantity. The quote that I love about this is by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, the author of The Little Prince. He says, "Perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away." So if you just keep that in your little fingers while you're working on things, I think that alone will help us build better things. Because great design is not about saying yes to things. It's about saying no, 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 no. Even when it's painful. And I would argue that it's most important, especially when it's painful. So going back to the machine in Oslo, they made some very painful decisions. What did they do? They compromised on security. One of the greatest design decisions that they made was compromising on security. What do I mean by this? What do you not see here in that process of swiping your card and walking on the train, which is so cool? What do you not see? There's no PIN code, right? Because that would have completely ruined that process. It would have been, swipe your card, PIN code, yeah, done. You know, that's not me being a superhero anymore. They decided not to have the PIN code. But what happens if you don't take the person's PIN code? well, you're liable for all the fraud that happens. So their design decision was not what's the border radius going to be or what's the exact shade of color that we're going to be using. Those were far less important. The greatest design decision was, can we afford to take a couple of £1,000 worth of fraud, every year? Can we take that hit? That is design. That's a design decision, not the color that they used on the sticker or on the screen. They also thought outside the screen. The screen here does nothing. It just gives you some instructions. It could just be a piece of paper. We get so caught up on thinking inside the screen when we're designing that we don't consider context and ergonomics, which is exactly what they did here. They considered how this machine would be used in the greater experience of a person who was taking a train somewhere, not just in terms of their tiny little bit of it that they were working on. But most importantly, they did the key thing they did correctly was they thought about the right thing. They worried about the right thing, which was their users' problems, not their own problems. They thought about their users' needs, not their own needs. What do I mean by this? Some of you might be in the tech world, maybe you work on apps, etc. If the first thing you're thinking is, what's my database schema going to look like? You're worrying about the wrong problem. You're worrying about your own problems, not your users' problems. And some of you might say, but Aral, what about our business needs? That's all nice hippie stuff, but what about our business needs? We're living in the age of experiences. Great design is your business plan. One of the companies that makes one of these remotes gets that. Can you see which one? And how is it that that company does things differently? Is it because, again, like in Oslo, they must have amazing designers? Like at Apple, do they just have amazing designers? Do some companies just have this amazing way of hiring the best designers? No. It's because of their organizational structure. Design thinking is not something that trickles up. It has to trickle down. So this is not how it works. I've never seen it work this way. You have great designers and developers in every corporation around, right? And usually the case is they're trying to get the upper management to understand the importance of design. And I've never seen it work. I would love to see it work. And if anyone has, please tell me, because I need that sort of inspiration. This is how it should work. Unless people at the top get it, unless it trickles down into processes, and because the processes and budgets are really important in getting design to work, we don't have great design. So why does Apple get it? They're organized, they're structured in a way that allows them to create great design. Because great design is a symptom of a design-led organizational structure and development processes. Here's a great example, the story of iDVD. That was told by Mike Evangelos, whose company was bought by Apple to create iDVD. He tells the story of how they were going to have a meeting with Steve Jobs. So they came up with all of these wireframes, all these artifacts that we love in design, right? We have this fetish for artifacts in design. Some of us sell artifacts and think that's design. And they came up with all these artifacts and the documentation. And he tells the story of how Steve Jobs walked in the room and completely ignored all of that and walked up to the board and drew a rectangle and said, this is the window. He drew a button and he said, this is the burn button. And what you do is you drag your video into the window and you press the burn button and you get a DVD, and that is iDVD. And that's what I mean when I talk about focus. That's the sort of focus you need. And this happens in probably your organization as well. Someone does say this. And then someone else, maybe from your marketing department, says, yes, but what about our partners' needs? What about these needs? What about, and it's those buts that erode the beauty of that design. Design is not democratic. It is not democratic. It's not what you do in a democracy. And it's not about drawing pretty pictures either. We seem to think, we always focus on the aesthetics of design because they're so visible. It's not about that. If I asked you to design me a car, you wouldn't just paint me a pretty picture of a car and say, I've designed you a car, right? It's very apparent how silly that is. If I ask you to design me a vacuum cleaner, you wouldn't just paint a pretty picture of a vacuum cleaner and say, I've designed you a vacuum cleaner. Because we need to understand the materials that go into this, right? We need to understand our materials, our problem domain. This requires specialist knowledge. We do seem, however, to think, I don't know why, but we seem to think like for applications and websites, drawing a pretty picture is design sometimes. I'd hate to break it to you, it still isn't. And we also love to separate the creative side of things, right? Which is what designers do. This is what we do. We solve the creative problems. And the technical side of things, right? Which is what developers do in their little dingy, dark spaces, lots of pizza and soda, right? Again, this is entirely false. Design is about a marriage of creative and technical. You cannot separate these two things out. Technical is creative, creative is technical. This is holistic. So I am an experienced designer, which means that I design things for people. And ergo, I am a developer. Since I am a designer, I am a developer, which means that I make things, again, for people. And these two things are not separate. They are all part of experienced design. Design and development are not two separate things. Design leads development. Development informs design. It is a cyclical process. It's an iterative process. Of course, we test during this to get feedback, right? And maybe part of the problem is there's so much prestige attached to the word design. Maybe we need to knock it down a few notches, right? Because design, you're doing something really creative, it's amazing. Why don't we just replace it with assumption? Because that's what we do as designers. We assume. Sure, we do research, right? But what we're doing is we're creatively guessing about things. The only time we actually understand, we begin to understand what we're making is when we start making it. Everything beforehand is an assumption. So we assume, we test, we make, we build, we test, right? There is missing from this the piece that we mostly miss when we're talking about design, which is the vision. The vision, the design vision, is what all of this comes out of. So, unfortunately, unlike what Google would like you to believe, you cannot A/B test your way to great design if you don't have a vision to begin with. Your A/B test will only lead you down one area, one possible area that you can go down. You cannot do marketing research to get your vision, as Nokia tried to do at one point with like 7 or 8 different marketing polls on different groups. You need a vision. Your users will not give you your vision. It's great to talk to them, but everything comes out of this vision. Your assumptions come out of it. When you test stuff, you need to filter that through your vision. You don't just take what everyone tells you. You have to filter it through your vision, and then you rinse and you repeat, and you rinse and you repeat. And this iterative process is how we make things. So design really isn't about drawing a straight line. I hear that a lot. I can't design, I'm not a designer, I can't even draw a straight line. You don't have to draw a straight line. It's not about pixel pushing, and goodness knows it's not about, I hate this term, making things pretty. Can you prettify this for us? No, I can't. I'm really sorry. That's not what it's about. Design is about psychology. It's about neuroscience. It's about linguistics, sociology, and philosophy. It's about understanding humans so that we can make things for humans. And what kind of things? Things that enlighten, amuse, and delight. Things that empower people. So what I try to do is I try to make things that make people happy, that give them good experiences. Unfortunately, usually in my interactions with things, I'm left frustrated or I'm left angry. So here's an example. Who's ever been on the BART in San Francisco? Anyone? Okay, so I had my first experience, I think it was last year, it was last year. And I didn't know what to do. I like to approach things naively. I like to let things tell me how they want to be used. So I approached the BART naively and I said, how do I use you? So I looked over here and everywhere there were these signs, get Clipper. They were just all around the place. So Clipper was this big thing, apparently, that you needed to get to start. So the getting started bit was the Clipper. So I had to get a Clipper machine. So I looked around, a Clipper ticket. So I looked around, and there were these machines. And they said clipper on them. Look, and clipper. Okay, awesome. And they were on the machine itself. Clipper, I can get a clipper from there. I knew what I had to do. Okay, I had to get a clipper. Awesome. So I went to that machine. It was actually a great experience. It was very painless, and I got myself a clipper. Yeah, that's what I got. And then I went to the ticket machine itself, the barrier, and I put my clipper card in, and it went, ah. I was like, oh, I got a clipper, it's not working? All right. So I went to the lady who was behind the counter, waited in line, got up, and I was like, well, clipper, not working. She was like, oh, no, that's not clipper. I was like, but clipper, right? She was like, no. And it was of course my mistake, because anyone can plainly see that this is not a clipper machine. This is a Muni machine. It is clear as day. You can see what machine this is. So it was, of course, my mistake. So I found the actual clipper machine, and that's where the adventure really began. Because this is a woozy of a machine. Initially, I didn't know where to start, because there was this sign, touch card on disc, which was kind of like a start here. I didn't have a card, so it was a chicken and egg problem. And it told me all these things like tickets and magnets don't mix, which was nice. I'm like, oh, okay, great, get rid of those magnets. They're expensive too. But it didn't tell me how I could start with this. So I went back to the counter. I really did this. This is not just for, making the story more interesting. I went back to the counter. I stood in line and went back to the woman, and I was like, I don't know how to start with that machine. Do I need to buy a ticket from you and then I touch it on there? She's like, she probably thinks I'm really daft by this point. She's like, no, just go in there, put your money in the machine, and you'll be all right. And I'm thinking, I'm in the States, put your money in, you'll be all right. That sounds about right. Okay, I'll try this. That's how things work there. Okay, so I went back, and basically, this is what you have to do. This is amazing. So you have a schedule of fees for where you want to get to, okay? So the first getting started bit is it makes you do the work. I'm doing the work now. I need to find where I want to get to and find how much that costs and store it in my memory, okay? That's how the machine works. You store it in your memory, first of all. That's what you do. Okay, and then you go over to the machine itself, and they don't make things easy. Like, you have to ask to insert a bill or coin, right? But they don't make it easy, because then the game would be too easy to win, right? So they don't line these things up. They want to add a little bit of excitement in there for you. So it's not too easy. We can't make it too easy. And then you start putting your money in. So I put $1 in. Okay, great. And it said cash inserted, minimum ticket fare this, and my ticket fare was $1.75. So I was like, okay, I'll insert another coin into this. All right, so I inserted my another bill, into it, and it said, okay, there you are. You've got $2 in there. Now, remember that it's $1.75. The place I want to get to is $1.75. How do you think? Some of you might know this. How do you think? Now, you have to be a real sadist to design this. So, how do you think you get from $2 to $1.75? Here's how it is. Some of you, unless you're sadistic, you probably have not been able to design this. This is how you do it, okay? You hit the subtract 5-cent button continuously until you get to $1.75, right? And then once you're there, you can ask to print the ticket, and listen to the sound. This is amazing. You put the turn sound up. You win! You win! You won the game! Oh my goodness. But if ever there was a great example of solving the wrong problem, as Asa was talking about earlier, it's this. They were solving the problem of how do we sell you a ticket. That's not your problem when you're there. Your problem is getting to where you want to get to, right? The ticket may or may not be something that you need. It's an implementation detail. But all of their energies are focused on how to sell you a ticket. right? So that's why the places you want to get to are exterior to the machine itself, because that's not the problem they're solving. They want to get your money and print you a piece of paper. They're solving the wrong problem. So things aren't always better when you get on a train. This is me in the UK in first class, and I was only in first class because I wanted to plug in my laptop. So this is me trying to reach that aim. I don't know if you see what's going to happen here. That's really... Mind you, you can't keep a determined geek down. So I was traveling. Thank you. I was traveling with an extension cable. But what's the problem there? The table is a beautifully designed table. It does exactly what a table should do. That plug is beautifully designed. It does exactly what a plug should do. But nobody thought about how they would be used together. Nobody thought about the whole experience of putting the plug and the table together in that specific situation. And that's why they don't work together. They work well separately, they don't work well together. And that wasn't the worst experience I had on that train. The worst experience was when I had to leave the train and I didn't know what to do, because this is how you leave the train. Okay. You wait for the doors to be automatically unlocked, okay? And then you put your arm out the window. And then you open the door. There was a moment when I thought I would just lead a life of adventure on this train just because I couldn't get out. And you might be thinking, wow, that's ridiculous. These people, they must have been really dumb to design this, right? This must be really bad design. There was a time when this was awesome design. This was amazing design. Because there was a time, this is an old train, there was a time when this train did not have automatically locking doors. Now, tell me what happens if a train doesn't have automatically locking doors and you, by accident, open the door and step outside while it's moving. You have a bad day, right? So if the result of a gesture is catastrophic to the extent that it might cause you death, for example, then making that gesture as hard to perform as possible is actually great design. So before this train had automatically locking doors, making it hard for you to open the door, to really want to open the door, to make it very explicit that you want to open that door, that's great design. What happened? Things changed. The train got automatically locking doors. That's the point where they should have gone back and thought about the whole experience, but they didn't. And we see this in applications and software much more because things change so much more often. And everything that changes has a cascade effect on everything else, on the whole experience. So because they didn't go back and then say, well, now this is ridiculous, well, they were left with that ridiculous whole process today. And this is somewhat what Steve Jobs was talking about when he said, we make the whole widget. You know, the bit about the table and the plug not working together, if you make the whole widget, if you're responsible for the whole experience, then you will catch stuff like that. Because it's important to remember that an experience is only as strong as its weakest link. A great example of this, Samsung, they gave me a phone. They sometimes do that. I don't know why they do it. But they gave me a phone to use, and I turned it on for the first time, and this is what I saw. No SIM card or phone is turned off. Think about that for a second. How does this happen? Right? How does this happen? It can only happen if you're not thinking about the whole experience, if you've segregated your team, so this is your hardware team, and here's your software team, and they're not thinking about how it's going to work together. For the person who wrote this error message, it must have made perfect sense. What are the only causes for this to possibly happen? Well, it might be no SIM card or the phone's turned off. He's not thinking, or she's not thinking about the whole process, how it doesn't make sense, because you wouldn't see that if the phone was off. Hardware and software are inseparable. We can't think about them as separate things anymore. There was a time, I call it the age of features, when we could. Because in the age of features, every new feature made something that was previously impossible possible. And that's a big thing. So if it was hard to use, that's kind of okay, because before it was impossible. But features today are a commodity. You can't differentiate on features because most things have feature parity. It's the experience that we differentiate on. So the age of features is over. We're living in the age of experiences. And yet still we get things wrong. Like the simplest things, like an elevator. An elevator control panel is a problem we have pretty much solved, right? It's a simple problem and we've pretty much solved it. This is entirely intuitive. The floor buttons are laid out in basically the order that the floors are, so you know where you're going. The buttons look like buttons. They say, press me. You know, it's beautiful just by their very affordance. And this, and the red ring shows you which floor you're actually on. And yet, we get it wrong. This was an elevator I was in. Every floor was flashing as I thought it was gonna die or something. I'm like, what is it trying to tell? And when you got to the floor, everything just lit up. You didn't even know which floor you were on, you know? If your labels need labels, maybe there's a problem. But that was nothing compared to this guy that I met in Lithuania. This is an elevator control panel, not a really large calculator, as you might be led to believe. And you can't really see it here, but the screen was really beautifully like glass-like. So I was tapping it like I would my iPhone, until I realized, oh, it's actually a button, but it doesn't have any of the affordances of a button, so I can't tap it. I need to press it. But that was nothing compared to when I had to come back downstairs. So this is my experience. I'm like, what do I press? I guess I press 0. Right? Look what happens. Error! We took something that does not inherently have an error condition and we added one to it. I don't know if you can see that. There's a minus sign and a dot. Like, what are you supposed to use those for? And I ran into this guy again in the UK afterwards, and this is what they'd done to it. This was a different hotel. Look at what they did. This is actually good. They hacked it. They removed all the unnecessary stuff with masking tape. But it still worked. It still worked the same way. You can kind of see it here. That's the error sound. But we took something that's really, really simple, right? That has great affordances. That is basically a convention. Because there are expectations in what we do. We can't just ignore those. If we ignore expectations, it doesn't always work out really well, right? The way things look is important, but not just because of aesthetics, because they tell us about how things want to be used. So this key, for example, is not really a key, even though it's immediately apparent to you that it is a key. It's a skeuomorphic key. It's an electronic key, and it works really well. It does. So this is me opening my hotel room door with it. There we go, it's green, and I walk in. The only thing I would change is I would actually make it possible for you to turn that, because if you've created that expectation, then why not follow through with it? But skeuomorphism doesn't always work as well. There are problems with skeuomorphism. This was me on a flight back from Oslo. And that's champagne, as you can see by the fact that it has a cork. And here's me opening my bottle of champagne. Pop the cork, and it's got a screw cap. Entirely useless, right? And these people, they apparently really want to get across the fact that it was champagne. They wanted to, make use of the production values of champagne. It was everywhere. It was just champagne. But the way things look tell you about how they want to be used. So this is a juice machine. And you can see that it has very strong affordances. Like those circles there say, put your glass here. That says push me. That says push the glass there. I don't know why they have two different ways of doing it. But very strong affordances. So I put my glass there. And I was like, OK, let's do this. So it lied to me. It said, put your glass here. And I was like, oh, yeah. Didn't quite work. Mistakes are awesome. Mistakes are how we learn. The thing not to do is to stop at good enough. That's good enough, right? Because then it becomes a game again. Where is it? Okay, yeah. The thing not to do is to stop at good enough, because that's when you get mediocrity. And mediocrity is everywhere. It is everywhere. In fact, I would say that we have a culture of mediocrity. And regardless of everything that I'm saying to you today, you can go away and spend your whole lives making a lot of money in the economy of mediocrity. Mediocrity is big business. I'm not going to tell you that it's not. People make billions every day from mediocrity. I think the question you have to ask yourselves is that what I want to do? Here's a great example of stopping at good enough. This was at an airport, and you can see there's one faucet there, one water faucet, right? And I just want to draw your attention to the label behind it. Warning, very hot water. Now, may I draw your attention back to the fact that there's only one faucet. So that's not a warning. That's a notice telling you that you're going to burn your hands. That's not a warning. Warnings are not a design solution. If you thought that was an isolated case, it's not. I've seen these everywhere. So there is lazy, maybe stopping at mediocrity. Then there's evil. There's evil design. So this was my Apple TV a while back, and I don't know if you can read it, but it says, "You've already purchased this item. Would you like to buy it again?" But I never had that thought before. Well, yes, thank you. That's very kind of you. Now, of course, you can't mention evil without mentioning Ryanair. So here's a great example from their website. So you can see that they're being very helpful here, because they're asking you to select your country of residence. Maybe they're going to make their service better for you. They're going to localize it for you, meet your needs better, right? Only that's not what they're asking you. What they're asking you is whether or not you want to buy insurance from them, travel insurance. And the answer, no, of course, lives between Latvia and Lithuania, where no usually lives. Now, this isn't bad design. This is amazing design, right? It just happens to be evil. So if you want to learn more about such evil design, there's a great site called darkpatterns.org that I hope you will look at. Noticing these things is really important. Noticing things that don't work is important, but it's the first step. It's the first step to making things better. So here's something that I get annoyed with every day: washing machines. Why are they so complicated? Again, this makes me feel like that little kid, right? The little kid, and it bothers me. And it's good. Be bothered by things that don't work, because if you're not bothered, we can't make things better. But that's the first step. So I thought, how would I redesign a washing machine? What do I do? What's my process? Well, I separate, some of my black I have a lot of black stuff, and my white stuff, and I don't know if I have any colors. And then I put some detergent in there, washing detergent, and then I put a softener in there, and then I turn this dial from 0 to 4. Why do I do that? I don't know. I know that works, and it gives me clean clothes, and it's worked before. Because remember, like what Asa was saying, the problem I'm trying to solve is not how do I wash my clothes. The real problem is how do I get clean clothes. I don't care about the washing process. That's an implementation detail. I couldn't care less if there were hamsters in there licking my clothes clean. As long as I got clean clothes. That's the important bit. So once I do this, it says something to me. I don't know what it is. I think it's positive because there's a smiling face. I don't know what the snake is for, but it's fine. And then, of course, I have to keep my finger on this one button to set the dryer duration, and it really wants you to feel what the machine's going to go through as it does it. So you have to just really keep your finger on that button. And then I press this other button, and it starts. And at the end of the process, I get clean clothes, which is the most important thing for me, right? So this is what we have right now. It's this machine, but all the processes outside of it as well. Choice of detergents, softener, how much I put in there, me separating my clothes. Well, if I've separated my clothes already, right? Why can't I just have those separate clothing compartments in the machine itself? Why? Because then I'm giving the machine some more to work with, some more data to work with, right? Now it knows that maybe those are my cottons and those are my delicates and maybe there's baby care and apparently that needs to be washed differently. The machine is the expert here, not me. So in that case, why don't I just put the softener and the detergent in the machine so it can make the choice about how much of each it has to use to wash each one of those different types of clothes the best way possible. It's the expert. I'm not. I shouldn't have to care about that. In which case, why do we have to expose all this inner complexity with that control panel? Let's take the control panel away. And then we have something where all I have to do is put my cottons into the cotton section and turn it on, which is about as much as I want to manage, right? Why? At the end of this process, I get clean clothes. So we go from something like this, which exposes all of its inner complexity to me, to something like this, which looks so different, doesn't it? It looks more like a chest of drawers, but it solves a very different problem. It doesn't solve the problem of how do you wash clothes. It solves the problem of how do you get clean clothes, right? And if I was more exuberant, maybe I'd have one for my dirties and one for my cleans, and I put it in the dirty and I'll get it out of the clean bit, right? And if I was just designing it for me, not for mass consumption, what do? I come home, I take off my shirt, I throw it on the ground, right? Maybe I would make it so that I had 3 holes in the ground, right? I took my shirt off, threw it in there, and I got clean clothes in my cupboard. And that would make me feel like a superhuman, right? And that is the difference between inside out and outside in design. And we don't think about the human usually because humans are scary to think about, right? We're irrational, we're emotional, we're unpredictable. Machines are so much easier to think about. They never let us down, right? But, and that's why it's so difficult, because even 2 people in the same room with a shared culture, with all of their visual and their oral cues can misunderstand each other, right? Think about people on the phone. How much easier is it for them to misunderstand each other? Think about people who are texting each other or writing emails to each other. How much easier is it for them to flame wars, right? Were invented through texting, through text mediums. To understand how difficult it is to create things that interact with people, remove one of the people from the equation and make a thing that interacts with a person. You've lost visual cues, oral cues. You've lost humanity. You need to inject this back. So Sidney Harris has this beautiful quote: the real danger is not that computers will begin to think like humans, but that humans will begin to think like computers, right? And we need to be aware of this so we don't do it. We don't need more things in the world. We need things that work better. Scott Hanselman's quote: there are a finite number of keystrokes left in your hands before you die. Think about that. We need beautiful experiences. What kind of beautiful experiences? Well, I was on a boat last year in Cannes, and in 18 hours came up with this thing called Grab Magic. I want to show you that as an example. You're sitting on your couch, and you're watching TV, and you've got your phone with you. And you want to share what's on TV, maybe with your Twitter friends, maybe with your Facebook friends. How would you do it? So this is one way that I came up with, again, in about 18 hours on a boat. So it wasn't this whole long process either, just me thinking about the problem. So this is how you do it. You've got your phone in your hand, you see something interesting, you grab it, and you transfer it to your phone with your finger, right? In case you missed that, here, I'll do it again. I'm reaching for it, I grab it, I transfer it to my phone. So when you want to transfer something from your TV to your phone, you just kind of go like that, you hold it in your hand, and you transfer it to your phone. So that's the sort of experience I'm talking about, where the technology is invisible, and the experience is almost magical. It's delightful when people see that. And it doesn't always require something that's that complicated. You know, it's sometimes the little things. One of my followers said, this is my favorite thing about Gmail by far. My favorite thing about Gmail, think about how complicated Gmail is. Her favorite thing is this little bit of humanity that asks you, did you mean to attach files when you wrote, I attached files? That's her favorite thing, not the thousands of servers, the software that's running on it, all that complexity, this little bit of humanity, the little details. These are things that I try to look into when I'm building things. Like this was my first app. You scan the barcode off a book, and then you could start reading the book. But what happens if the internet connection is slow? So here it says, in just a few seconds, all will be revealed. But the internet is slow. The internet connection is slow. It's not its fault. But it starts to adapt. It says, oh, it's taking a little longer than usual. Okay. And then it starts to be self-reflexive. It's saying, this isn't making me look good. And then you might be getting frustrated, but he breaks out into tears. So he's having a worse day than you. Right? The naive implementation of this would be an indeterminate progress bar. Here, we're just taking that and adding a little bit of humanity to it. That doesn't mean build Clippy into your applications, just so you know, right? But it does mean that empathy is one of the most important traits that we have. So when I was building Feathers, one of my other apps for tweeting, it actually got Stephen Fry apparently back into tweeting because he was disenchanted with it, and this was his first tweet when he went back. It's just adding a little bit of fun, a little bit of emotion back into things. And if you look at it, you can do a little bit of things like Unicode art, but like the little bird fills up as you're typing. It doesn't tell you how many letters you have left, because how can you plan ahead 120 letters? It tells you when you reach a point where you can do something about it. It gives you that information, but before that, it's just a little bird that's turning green and then goes red. That's all it is. Or even less useful, flaps its wings. People love that. Love the fact that the bird flaps its wings. But also things like why the keyboard behaved exactly like the built-in keyboard and not almost like it. The difference between almost and exactly was about 2 weeks of development time for me. But it was important to get that right because the details matter. Because people appreciate these things. Look at the words that people use to describe it. Joyful, adorable, fun, fell in love with. Not like, not use, fell in love with. If you can build things that people fall in love with, that's a reward in and of itself. And it is all about these details. Little things that I'm anal about, like this is not aligned properly, right? Little things that I pay a lot of attention to when I'm working. And I want to end with one such little thing that I noticed recently. This is Lindsay Sandiford. She was caught in Bali with a certain amount of cocaine and sentenced to death by firing squad. And I read about this, I think in January. I think it was an independent article. And I read about this because she had asked for legal aid from the UK government. She's a British citizen. And the UK government, she needed something like £2,000 or £3,000 to launch an appeal against her death sentence by firing squad. And the UK government, the current UK government said, you know what, we really can't care less, all right? And I read about this and I thought, my gosh, this is ridiculous. How can we not help this person get legal representation? How can we call ourselves a modern country and not be able to give legal aid to this person when she needs it? It's £3,000 or £4,000. We could raise this. So I started a Indiegogo page, and notice what's really striking about that page. It's that photo. That photo immediately makes a connection with you, right? The size of that photo, the prominence of that photo is really important. And we raised several £1,000s over the evening. I started at 11 p.m. and by the morning we had raised several £1,000s with this until we realized that someone else had raised the money and we didn't need it anymore, so we refunded all of it back. Recently, she lost her appeal, and I got a message from her sister saying she needs £8,000 now to launch an appeal to the Supreme Court in Bali. And can you help? I was like, sure, but this time we decided to use Just Giving because it's more fit for purpose than Indiegogo. Look at the difference in the page. Do you see why it's different? Can you see that little detail where it doesn't have the same emotional appeal? That tiny photo, that tiny thumbnail has nowhere near the same emotional appeal that the Indiegogo page had. So I noticed this because we weren't raising as much money as well. So I set up my own blog post and started pushing people towards that with that photo. The only difference is some pixels, right? Picture this big or picture this big. But it made all the difference. We ended up raising over £10,000 for her. An 87-year-old pensioner donated the remaining £1,600 at the end after hearing about her plight on BBC Three radio. So what I'm trying to say here is that the details matter, the little things matter, because they are a reflection of our own attention to detail, which itself is a symptom of caring about the time, the effort, and the experiences of the people who use the things that we make. Think about it. We all have a tiny amount of time in this world, and then we die. And we spend that time having experiences. Experiences with people and experiences with things. And the quality of those experiences determine the quality of our lives. And we as designers, as the people who craft experiences, we have a profound responsibility. A responsibility to not take for granted the limited time that people have on this earth. A responsibility to make that time as painless, as empowering, as enjoyable, and as delightful as we can. Because this is all there is. And it's up to us to make it better. Thank you. I know I've overrun a bit, but I can't end without thanking the people who made this presentation possible by sharing their photos and their various creations under Creative Commons licenses. If you don't know what Creative Commons is, please look it up. It's a way of saying not all rights reserved, but some rights reserved. And I want to end with a special shout out. This is my dad. And when I was 7 years old, he brought home this IBM XT computer, and he put it in front of me, and he brought home this basic manual. And he said a very important thing to me. He said, "Go on, play with it. You can't break it." I proved him wrong, eventually. But this is what got me started. This was probably my first program, 10 print hello, 20 go to 10, run. Hello, 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 hello. That, to a 7-year-old, was magical. Getting the computer to do that was magical. Of course, eventually I was like, how do I stop it? And then I created a star field, and then I put a spaceship in the star field, and I started making my own games. And if you can create your own universe and you're 7, that stays with you. That's why I'm standing here talking to you today, because he said that. Today, I'm trying to pass on the same thing to the next generation. I don't know if you've heard of Code Club, but it's a nationwide network of after-school, volunteer-led coding clubs. It's free to attend, it's free for schools. And we have over 760 clubs in the UK today, and it's only been going for 1 year. It was founded by Claire Sutcliffe and Linda Sondwick, and I'm one of the directors. And what we do is we try to pass on that spark to the next generation. And before coming here, I learned that in Newcastle, there are only 3 clubs, and in Sunderland, I think there's only 4, which is very low for a place of this population. So if you'd like to help change that, please either email laura@codeclub.org.uk or volunteer through the site, or just come and speak to me after this talk. I'll be here for the remainder of the conference. And maybe together, we can help ignite that spark in the next generation of makers. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.